In February 1942, Stefan Zweig sent the final manuscript of a short novel to his publisher. A few days later, he and his wife took their own lives in a small house in Brazil, thousands of miles from the Europe he had spent his life writing about. The book was called the Schachnovelle, the Royal Game. I've read this one more time than almost anything else on my shelf, and every time it unsettles me in a slightly different way. On the surface, it's a story about chess. What it's actually about, in my view, is what happens to a mind when you strip away everything except the inside of its own skull. The setup is simple. A ship crosses the Atlantic towards Argentina. On board is Mirko Centovic, the reigning world chess champion, brilliant at exactly one thing and seemingly empty everywhere else. A group of wealthy passengers, half amused and half desperate to humble him, challenge him to a game. Then a stranger steps in. Dr. B, an Austrian lawyer, quiet, nervous, clearly carrying something he hasn't talked about. He starts advising the amateur players against Centovic, and within minutes, it's obvious, he understands the game on a completely different level than anyone at that table. Here's the detail that gets me every time. Dr. B hasn't played a real game against another human in years, maybe ever properly. So how does a man who barely plays chess beat the actual world champion? That answer is where Stefan Zweig stops writing about chess and starts writing about something darker. Dr. B was arrested by the Gestapo after the annexation of Austria, not physically tortured in the way we usually picture, something quieter, and in its own way crueler, placed alone in a hotel room. No books, no newspaper, no human contact beyond a guard delivering food in total silence. No idea how long it would last or whether it would end at all. Total isolation. Nothing to read, nothing to do, nothing but his own thoughts circling the same fears, day after day. There's a line in the book that captures this better than I ever could. Man tat uns nichts, man stellt uns nur in das vollkommene Nichts, denn bekanntlich erzeugt kein Ding auf Erden einen solchen Druck auf die menschliche Seele als das Nichts. In English, roughly, they did nothing to us. They simply placed us into complete nothingness, because, as is well known, nothing on earth exerts as much pressure on the human soul as nothingness itself. That's it. That's the entire horror of what happened to Dr. B in one sentence. Not violence, not pain, just emptiness, pressing down until something inside him had to give. And then, by pure chance, he steals a book from a guard's coat pocket while waiting outside an interrogation room. He's desperate for anything to read. Back in his cell, he opens it. It's a collection of championship chess games. At first, he's disappointed. He barely plays. But it's all he has, so he works through the games anyway, move by move, memorizing them purely out of boredom. Within weeks, he memorized all 150 games completely, and now he has a new problem. Nothing left to read, and a mind that just discovered the one thing capable of occupying it fully. So he starts playing against himself. In his head, no board, no pieces, only pure visualization. And this is the part of the story I personally find genuinely disturbing. To play against yourself properly, you can't just make one set of moves. You need two separate strategic minds working against each other at the same time, each one forgetting what the other is planning. Dr. B gets terrifyingly good at this. Slowly, without fully noticing, his mind actually splits, not as a metaphor, something closer to literature. He starts treating his two chess personalities as separate people, arguing inside his own head, while his actual self watches both of them spiral, unable to stop it. He has a breakdown in his cell. The guards, worried that they lose a useful prisoner, finally release him. By the time he's on the ship, years later, sitting across from the world champion, he hasn't fully recovered. He plays the games in his head once more. defeats Centovic, then has to stop almost immediately. Just touching the game again threatens to pull him straight back into that fracture. What strikes me most about this story is how clearly Stefan Zweig is writing about more than one fictional prisoner. He's writing about his own mind in exile, watching the European world of culture and reason he loved completely collapse around him from a distance he never asked for. Zweig wasn't locked in a hotel room, but he was cut off all the same, living in Brazil, writing in German, for an audience being murdered or scattered across the globe. Watching everything he had built his identity on get erased in real time, with no power to stop any of it. Dr. B's mind needed something, anything to hold on to in isolation. What's kept your own mind occupied during your hardest stretches? Let me know in the comments. Stefan Zweig finished this book and mailed it to his publisher. Within days, he and his wife were dead. He never wrote an explanation. He didn't need to. He had already written it, in the story of a man whose mind became both his only refuge and eventually his prison. Sometimes the last thing a writer creates tells you more about them than anything they ever said out loud. The book isn't really about chess, it's about what's left of a person once everything else has been taken away.